Ocarina of Time review. In no world is there a need for anyone to review OOT in the year 2023, and especially a review as lucid as this is going to be, since due to my dolphin updating I actually didn't finish the game since my save state and save files were wiped, which also ended my short run of Paper Mario for the Wii, but I save finished around 80% of it, and TBH I don't remember strictly rating the final dungeon anyway. One of the things you realize when you review older games versus older movies/music is that games are most limited in the regard of technical comparison versus older music and movies, where yes there were technical limitations now, but if you agree with the idea that music and movies had better acting by classic actors or better directed by legendary directors such as Kubrick or Francis Ford Coppola, you can directly compare The Godfather, 1974, to The Irishman, 2019, and allow it be a fair comparison, or comparing Dark Side of the Moon, 1973, to Muse, whichever album takes your fancy. I am trying to say I am aware going into replaying this game that this is a game from 1999 re-released on the GameCube with small technical updates and patches, and TBH I am still surprised the 64 of OOT is still considered playable, since I have 10 minutes of it and it felt bad, like really bad. In hindsight, I think I should have tried to the 3DS port of OOT, although unsure how the emulator would have dealt with the implemented gyroscopic camera and playing OOT with a Xbox One controller and not a GC. My PC runs sweet and steady, but the occasional blindsiding and slowing down when aiming did screw me over a little bit, never game breaking, but you did notice it from time to time. Also, just to bring up the point is that OOT feeling clunky is to be expected, and to compare it to its contemporaries is inherently unfair, but the comparison in my mind was always made since when I first played OOT it was with the OOT/Wind Waker dual pack for the GC, and Wind Waker for its flaws just felt like it ran on butter. There are many reviews/video essays picking apart and analyzing every facet of OOT, and when I was at the Midlands Melee Invitational and talking about Sheik, the Menace of the Midlands, Patty pointed out how Sheik is a cop and is used in the secret Zelda royal family military and partakes in torture, aka the entire Spirit Dungeon, and at that moment I had my mind widened about how that was the case. The thing about reviewing older video games, especially one as well played and legendary of OOT, you do have to factor in story/music/character to make up for can be considered an overall lacking experience by modern gaming, or even post-64 standards. Like if I forced to choose which game had to exist between OOT and Mario 64, I'd choose Mario 64 without a second thought, and yes, a lot of that is down to the incredible speed running scene around the game and how much you can break and contort the physical reality of that game. And yes, the OOT does exist and has nice tricks, but they don't really improve the overall gaming experience, like casually using backward long jumps in a casual Mario 64 playthrough. My hot take per se would be if OOT had a rebuild from the ground remake, and not in the bloomy obnoxious Unreal Engine 1, it could be a 10/10 game. It just has a lot quality of life issues as a game, especially when it comes to the goddamn finicky menus and the unclear nature of Navi color notification, and yes, Navi is just as annoying as I remember, and so many time it came a try these 3 songs to get something to activate, and I know later games get criticized for hand holding or railroading the experience, but quite a bit of OOT is needlessly cryptic. Yes, OOT is objectively an easy game, especially if you use the fairy bottle system and no I've not tried hero mode yet, which actually only changes the damage output and 1.5 temple. It's not this mythical game extender like the ever elusive OOT N64DDURU was meant to be. The game's easiness is only tempered by the awkwardness of the camera and sometimes the emulator eating your inputs, and this does cause the problem that I've noticed with a lot of early 3D action games, is that if you did have the modern quality of life improvement in combat, it would already diminish any small challenge the game brings. Now vibes/mood/scenes/kino are also all important in playing older games. That is true, however, I personally feel, unless I am playing on OG hardware on a warm curve CRT glow, I am just going to use the advantage of modern day to rush through this experience and take as many shortcuts as possible in order to get to the meatier part of the gameplay. So in some sense I just did a dungeon rush playthrough and use speed up to get across the vast expanse of Hyrule Field, and did have me wishing there was a cheat code in OOT which stopped all enemies from spawning outside of temples, or fuck it, even within temples. I'd be down to play a completely liminal OOT where it was the bosses only. OOT was a childhood classic, but also the trophies in Melee also made me wonder about the game even more, and was confused about Majora Mask, because all the details I can attain from the trophies made it seem like the world's trippiest version of OOT, a game I thought was pretty trippy to begin with. Favorite area of the game along for vibes is the Lost Woods for obvious kino and lore reasons, and favorite temple is a small toss-up between the Forest Temple and the Shadow Temple, but more for vibes than actual design, since I'd say the Shadow Temple is better designed, but having to use the hover boots is clunky and the fake door gimmick gets old real quick. Meanwhile the Forest Temple is more solidly designed, but if not a bit tedious and a joke of a boss fight. Music. We all know OOT music is top tier and took inspiration, stolen, from classic prog like all good gaming soundtracks. Characters/story, and this is where it kind of becomes an external problem in the game itself, since the OOT manga really does expand and extend the story characterization of the game, and so the game suffers by comparison. Also, I know in the world of art criticism there is a debate between reading a book and listening to an audiobook and how you can interpret the source material, but I've came to realization that most games do need voice acting to properly tell a story, since I know it's a meme that people just press A in stories and wonder where did the story go, but reading lines and lines of dialogue with stunted faces does not make you engaged in the material. So yes, if there is a fan mod of OOT with voice acting, I'll play it. Sheik loves to talk in riddles and she tries to test Link and not to all game theory. Did Sheik really have a backup plan if Link failed? So I'd definitely be like, here are all the songs, take on the temples in the most logical order, or as pretentious people would call it, ludonarrative dissonance. Like you telling me Sheik didn't know she can just tech chase and chain grab Ganondorf out of existence and so relies on low tier Link to get the job done. Other thoughts? One of the better game design choices that surprised me was the Scarecrow song, which allowed for the skipping of certain areas in dungeons. The side quests still hold up as both short and interesting. The water temple isn't that bad, but also more annoying in ways that I can remember. Graphical unclarity does hinder the game in more ways than you expect it to. The cheats didn't work, unsure if it was the correct version of the game or not. I'd defo be down to play any fan mods or expansion. The game is a liminal mysterious masterpiece, but its reputation as some spooky in-depth masterpiece is just retroactive internet mythology. I really want to play Majora Mask, but for some reason it runs really poorly on my Dolphin emulator. I am impressed by how much collectibles are in the game, but also feel it's still too spread out and uneven. The first part of the game as young Link is still the most boring, tedious part of the game, and if I replayed, I'd just get straight to adult Link. And yes, the grass/water/fire young Link all kinda suck, especially the original Fire Temple. I am sure this is explained and is just video game logic, but it's still morbid, and I know millimeter and the grieving theory making it the way more sadder game, that you can go between two set points, Indiana time, Indiana the game, but young Link can't tell everyone about the future of the impending demise of everything. Is what I'd also, if the ending alone didn't bring up the idea that you could have done that even in a limited degree, like after you opened the seal and the mages went into hiding you still had contact with Saria in Saria's song. I still think the ending sucks and it a cop-out. So what's else on the agenda? Well, my playthrough of Twilight Princess came to a screeching halt when the game decided Link can't get up from ledges, and this may or may be down to using quick walk/long roll cheats early and may have messed with the internal code of the game somehow, because I can grab ledges from above but Link can't jump, but there is a cheat for him to jump, and problem is early one, you don't need to grab any ledges and the wolf Link grab ledges for you, so I can't rule out that it's a problem with the Forest Temple. Even so, I was worried about the Water Temple next, since when I first played TP I glitched through to the final boss of the Water Temple and I think I got around 30% of the original game on the GameCube, so that's currently being put on the back burner. I am currently juggling 4 games, that is Breath of Fire 4/FF6/Tales of Eternia and a yet decided 4th game, but I need to start playing new, old, games because I am currently only replaying games I've played but with the no encounter challenge, which are making the games way quicker and overall more enjoyable, but I need to start putting metal to the pedal to get my 25 games before end of 2023 to happen. My playthrough of Shadow of the Colossus went nowhere fast, quite literally due to the constant crispy 70% frame rate. I am currently juggling Rayman 2/3 and Okami on the PS2 emulator, and to note, I do have Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2 itself, but I really want to play my PS2 on a CRT for the full experience. I really did want and still do want to play Twilight Princess, and I'll force myself to get around to it, and also, because one of my written essays I wanted to write for the longest time is the one between Wind Waker versus Twilight Princess and how the consensus over time has changed into heavily Twilight Princess favor.